Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by MiloTree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Blogger Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Leslie. I am a serial entrepreneur, founding Catch My Party and MiloTree. I am a business coach and a business translator. I take what is working in online business, break it down so you can use this yourself. Before I get started, I want to announce that we are launching our newest product called MiloTree Easy Payments. And this is for those of you who want to set up a membership or subscription business, and you can do it in a snap. All you do is take one of our pre-designed sales pages, put it on your blog, and it's got a money button on it where people can sign up. Or that money button is also a link, and you can just give it to people, to your customers, to sign up. Here's the beauty part. Host your membership wherever you like. MiloTree Easy Payments integrates with all major email service providers. So you have those people's email addresses. You can host your membership in a private Facebook group just through email. You could make a private podcast. You could do it on your blog. You do not have to learn another complicated platform, and those platforms are really expensive. Our goal is easy. You can manage your entire business in our dashboard. So if this resonates with you, you want to learn more, you want to be one of our beta testers, please head to milotree.com/beta tester and I will reach out directly to you. Again, milotree.com/beta tester. And as you can tell, I'm really excited about launching this because this could be a fantastic way for you to make money. For today's episode, I have Cynthia Samanian on the show. She is the founder and CEO of Hidden Rhythm. And what she does is she helps culinary professionals teach online cooking classes. You can tell this business came out of the pandemic, but if you are thinking of teaching something live to an audience and making money, this is the episode for you. Cynthia shares her whole framework. I hope this episode gets your wheels turning. So without further delay, here is my interview with Cynthia Samanian. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jillian.
I was saying before I pressed record that all I know about you is what I have read on your website and the little bit of talking we've done about having daughters. So I want to ask you about your entrepreneurial journey and how you built your company and where you are today and how COVID fit into all this.
Absolutely. Yeah. COVID played a very big role in it, but I'll take you back a little bit. I actually worked in a few different traditional jobs. So while I'm in the culinary world now, I didn't go to culinary school. I'm not a chef, but I always had a passion for food. One thing to know about me is I grew up in a Persian family. My parents were immigrants here in the US. And so for us, food is a huge part of our culture. And growing up, I was always the one setting the table for these dinner parties. And of course, when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you're not thinking about it like, oh, one day this will come in handy. You're just kind of resenting the fact that you're having to do this. But long story short, really that ingrained this nature of hospitality in me and recognizing the importance of food and connecting our family to others who had no idea what Persian culture and the country of Iran were all about. So it's hard for me to kind of skip that part because that is such a core fundamental piece of what I do today, which I'll dive into. Now, I went to college, studied finance, worked in tech. Like you, I have my MBA, really kind of followed those traditional those traditional jobs. And knowing though that food was always that one thing that I kept wanting to work in. I'm the type of person, I'm sure your listeners can relate to this. I love to be immersed in my work. Like there is no black and white. It's just one big gray area for me. So I knew that for me to be fulfilled in my career, I needed to be in a space that I truly cared about and excited me. And that was food. So eventually I left tech in 2015, left that all behind to start my entrepreneurial journey. And, it was a windy path, but ultimately I started Hidden Rhythm, which is my culinary marketing agency that I run today. In that
I need to stop you. What is a culinary marketing agent?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I do is I help food businesses of all sizes. So brands like Bob's Red Mill to chef entrepreneurs. I help them create great experiences for their audiences. Now, before COVID, I did a lot of that through in-person experiences. So working with brands on pop-up events, really immersive, engaging events that would help them connect with their target audience. Well, with COVID coming into the picture in 2020, nearly all of my events were completely wiped out. And I had to reinvent my business and think about who I really wanted to serve and how I could help them through what I had learned with digital marketing, my entrepreneurial journey, and so on. So I did make that pivot in 2020. It was a really interesting one, to say the least, and haven't looked back.
So mostly you were working with brands. How about restaurants? How about celebrity chefs, those people?
Yeah, primarily brands and influencers. So I worked a lot with food bloggers and content creators who were seeking to work with brands, right? So there's this relationship that I'm sure you and your listeners know very, very intimately. And so, for example, when a company would hire me to help them create this pop-up experience, one example is I worked with Bear Snacks and we built an indoor apple orchard a block off Venice Beach in September. Okay. And it was this immersive indoor experience that helped bring the season of fall to the beaches of LA. Well, part of that experience involved workshops. And so I did a lot of outreach with content creators and bloggers in the food space so that they could come in, teach workshops, get paid, of course, and help really build their brand, but also the relationship with the sponsoring brand. So I did a lot of that, not so much restaurants and celebrity chefs. It was really focused on the natural food and wellness space. So most of the brands that you see on the shelves at Whole Foods.
Got it. Okay. So COVID hits, all your events go away. And what do you think? Oh no.
Yeah. And of course, 2020 was going to be my biggest year yet. I had really hit my stride in my business. It takes a few years, right, to kind of get the ball rolling. And I was in that place, Jillian, where I was like, this is going to be the year. And then COVID hit, and I was getting phone call after phone call from my clients who had events lined up for the summer and the fall, and they were asking for their deposit checks back. And we're talking $20,000 deposit checks that I was counting on to pay the bills. Not to mention, I was 6 months pregnant at the time with my first daughter. And so it was a really stressful time, very stressful. We didn't really know, of course, how long this would last. But the one thing that I can say, and what I am so grateful for, is that I had always in my head known that I wanted to build an online business. And I had taken courses. I had invested money and time for years leading up to that moment in 2020 for the day that I would be ready to do it. We always have that idea that one day I'll launch that online program. And I was planning to do it in September of that year. Well, of course, after having a baby and being on maternity leave, I thought, oh yeah, I'll definitely get an online course out the door, which looking back now was crazy to think. So with my pipeline gone for the rest of the year, events basically on hold indefinitely, I decided now was the time to hunker down. And I pre-sold my course. So I put it out there before I had created it. I had a concept. And eventually it became what is now Cooking Class Business School, which is my signature program that provides content and coaching to culinary pros who want to grow their online culinary business. So that includes chefs, food bloggers, cookbook writers. We have such a diverse group of professionals who want to teach online, and I'm helping them do that.
Awesome. Okay. So I love that you identify like who your ideal customer is. So let's say I'm a food blogger and I'm working with sponsors and I'm creating recipes and I'm doing those things. I'm trying to grow my audience. I'm monetizing via display ads. And I think there's something more. In fact, we have a coaching group and somebody in the coaching group, we have a variety of different verticals, niches represented. And one of our coachees is a food blogger, and she has said, I want to start teaching cooking. Now that there's Zoom and we all kind of get Zoom, what do I do? So explain like how this whole thing works.
Yeah, absolutely. So, online cooking classes had existed before COVID, but of course, with COVID, what we've seen not only in the food industry, but across healthcare and education is that people were basically forced in a way to experiment with things online that they normally would have dismissed. So the market, of course, grew very quickly in 2020. But even as things start to open up as we move out of COVID, what's really interesting is that the fundamentals haven't changed. So there are so many reasons why a food blogger should consider teaching online. One of the things is that they can reach anyone in the world with their content. A lot of the people who come into my program have taught in person, whether they've done events locally. I know food bloggers who will do workshops in their hometown, and that's great. But think about the reach you have when you truly can go online and anyone in the world, anyone can take your class. So that to me is just so impressive. And one of the other benefits too is that you can even move into other audiences. For example, corporate classes are a huge business right now.
I hadn't even thought of that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That's where we're seeing a lot of students in my program get that quick cash injection, because if you think about it, companies have had remote workforces for years, right? This isn't just a COVID trend, but of course it was accelerated with the pandemic. And these teams are looking for experiences that bring them together. So if you have, especially if you have a niche that is really interesting and unique, whether it's sushi making or Peruvian cuisine, right? The more unique, the more interested a lot of these companies are in using your class as a medium to bring their teams together. And the great thing about corporate events is that you sell one person, that decision maker, and you can get 20, 30, even more people at that class. And some companies have budgets of upwards of $100 per person per quarter. So that can be really lucrative.
In fact, okay. So our first site that we started is called Catch My Party, and we still run it, and it's still growing and all of that. And what we did for us in the pandemic as well, it was like, we went, oh no, there go parties. That's our bread and butter. We watched our traffic drop 60% in a week. And I was freaking out. My husband is my partner. He's mellower than I am. But, I was going, oh my God, we're going to be out of business. And then what we started doing was pivoting to how can people throw parties virtually? Like, what are ideas? And so we scoured the internet. We found all these cool things, like have a sommelier come in with your girlfriends on a Zoom call and do like a wine tasting, or do some sort of experience like what you're talking about. And by the way, those blog posts like blew up. People are like, hey, I hadn't thought about this idea. So it's like, now I feel like people kind of understand that you can have an experience online and it can be really rich.
Absolutely. And one of the other use cases is, thinking about families who are distanced. If you have a college student who's studying abroad, or if you have a group of friends and life has just led you to live in different cities, this is just how things happen in life, right? So we would have never thought before, I think, oh, let's grab our girlfriends together and do an online cooking class as like a fun way to gather. Yeah, we'll still take that trip together maybe one day. But, this has opened up a whole new set of use cases that before the pandemic existed, but I don't think people really thought of online cooking classes as an option.
And I have to say, just even beyond that, some of the ideas that we were promoting is have somebody come in and do a meditation session or do crafting or whatever. Like you can take what you're teaching and expand it out, because anything that people would want to learn, now they can.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about then, I'm a food blogger and I say, okay, Cynthia, I want to teach online. So let's assume that I don't have a huge community. I don't have a ton of followers on Instagram, but I'm really passionate about, let's say, something specific like, okay, let's say sushi, because I love sushi and that makes me hungry.
Me too.
So let's say I know I can create really cool sushi and I want to teach that to people. What do I do? Like, tell me, how do I even think about starting this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so glad you asked this question, because when I think about online cooking classes, I teach how to build a profitable online cooking class business, right? Not just how to go and teach online. And that's the distinction that I think is really important, because to that person, they could do a Google search and figure out what camera to buy, hop on Zoom, create a graphic on Canva, and throw it out there for their audience. And that's what I see a lot of people doing.
Nicole,
now, if you actually want it to be a real business, which I'm sure your listeners are of the mindset, like, yes, let's make this something that's profitable and real, you have to approach it differently. And what I do tell my students is that your online cooking class business needs an online marketing strategy, right? A lot of them come from the brick and mortar world, so they think that they can just do what worked to promote their local classes, but the online space is so different. So what I recommend is actually a 4-step framework, and that's what I walk my students through, and I'll just at a high level explain it to you. So the first thing that they need to do is zero in on a niche and their offer. So you are already ahead of the game, Jillian, because you know that you want to teach how to make sushi, which is a great niche. It's one that corporate clients are always asking for. And I think people in general love the novelty of learning how to make something like sushi. But you've got to know your niche. And this is a huge challenge for people who are used to kind of being a generalist in the kitchen and, love doing it all. So this is the foundation of it, is really understanding your niche, but also understanding your unique brand story. So what makes your sushi class different than someone else's?
Instead of me talking about MiloTree, I thought I would share what one of our happy customers, Nicole Carr from Take It From Nicole, had to say.
I absolutely love the MiloTree app. I think it's really cool. It was so easy to install for me. For someone who's not a tech person, it was click, copy, paste, boom, and it was on my WordPress blog. I have it set up for Pinterest, but you could use it for email signups or Instagram. And it's a great way to build your audience really inexpensively at under $10 a month. I set it and forget it, and I just see Pinterest followers growing. So people that I'm sending from Pinterest to my site are then becoming followers and seeing more of my content. So it's a great way to take something that you're already driving traffic to and to build social followings or email lists.
Thank you, Nicole, for that awesome testimonial. And remember, MiloTree will not slow down your site one bit.
Like, your cooking class isn't a commodity. It is an experience. And so much of that is tied to you as a person, the stories you tell, your sense of humor, your ability to entertain. So you've got to really hone in on that. And I think so many people skip that and just move straight to the transactional details, like how much should I charge? What should I teach? And what time should I have the class? But that first step is so crucial in standing out, especially in this crowded space that we're seeing online cooking classes become.
Got it. Okay. So of your four,
that's the first one.
First one. Okay. So
zero in. So
on your niche and your story. Okay. Love it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like a good acronym. So I'll just give you the acronym up front. It's ZEST, like lemon zest, ZEST. So zero in. Okay. The second is engage. So what you want to do is spend some time to engage with your audience, right? Rather than rushing to the sale, rather than just posting everywhere, buy my class, sign up, register, right? Throwing discounts because you are scared no one's going to sign up. Another step I see a lot of people miss is the actual investment in building a relationship with your audience. I talk a lot about this concept of know, like, and trust. right? People need to know who you are, like what you offer, and then they'll eventually trust you enough to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't just rush to, like a relationship. We can't
I was
just
just
rush
going
to
to say, it's like
marriage.
dating. Absolutely.
Right. So there are ways
Absolutely.
to do that. Yeah.
Okay. And what are your best strategies? Because again, let's say I don't have a big audience. Let's say I haven't been building my list and cultivating, like going live on Facebook or whatever. How do I attract those people who want to make sushi with me?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I love that you asked that because sure, if you have a huge audience on Instagram, it will be easier for you, but we're not all there. And some of the most talented people haven't spent the time to build an audience, and that's totally fine. So you do, though, have to get serious about building your email list. I'm a firm believer in that. I do believe it's important. So I believe in kind of using something like a freebie or lead magnet to attract people, give them a taste of what you offer. But once again, it has to be related to your niche because it's not about quantity. You don't want as many downloads as possible for your freebie. You want the right people to sign up, the people who are so excited to learn how to make sushi. I also talk a lot about in my program how to work with partners. I think when you're small and you don't have a big audience, you have to be scrappy and leverage partners, whether it's other culinary instructors who have a related niche. We've seen great success with culinary professionals working with nonprofit organizations, especially in this last year. So there are a lot of things that you can do to piggyback off of existing audiences that potential, partners have built. And so that's engage. And then the next step is sell. Which is actually converting your audience into students. And this is a little bit more tactical because if you've done your work on zeroing in and engaging your audience, then the selling piece becomes easier. People know who you are, what you're about, and the value you provide. So this is more about how to kind of set up your sales page, what platforms to use, like the real tech nitty gritty of it, because that is where a lot of people can get hung up.
And what do you recommend? Okay. So first of all, let's say though, like, how do I get my freebie out there? People say, make a freebie and then you'll get email signups, and it's not that easy. So what is your thought? I love your partnering idea, but let's say like, okay, I don't have any friends who do what I do, or maybe they're in the same boat I am. How do I get that stuff out in front of people? Do I pay?
You can run Facebook ads if you'd like. That's one strategy. I don't recommend it in the beginning because really you are still trying to figure out what your audience wants. So if you start throwing money at it, maybe by running Facebook ads for your freebie, you could be attracting the wrong people, or you could be using the wrong messaging. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's going to be a very frustrating experience.
And possibly very expensive.
Very expensive. And so I do have students who are like, great, my freebie's done. Let me do the Facebook ads piece now. And I'm like, no. Like, do we know that this is what your audience wants? So in the beginning, it is slow. I will say it is slow. But what I do tell my students to do is talk about your freebie more than you think you need to. Right? This idea of being a broken record. If you feel like you're a broken record, you're doing it right. Because
I love that.
We think people hear and read everything we put out there, but the truth is they don't. I mean, I talk about Cooking Class Business School all the time on social, and I still have people who ask me, what is your program? You have a program? I completely
agree. And here's my tip that I teach our students. If you are sending emails, and yes, you want to provide value. However, your solution, your paid solution is providing value. It's not like I provide all this value and then at the end in a PS, I mention that I sell something. No. You mention that multiple times. You get that message out and you believe in what you're doing. You're not being salesy. This is your whole thing. Yes, you're going to make money. You're in business to help people. So it's like switching your mindset of saying, Absolutely. Go. I love that you mention your products all the time.
Yeah. And you have to, I love that you brought that up. I mean, it's in service of your audience. Like if my students or if my potential students don't know about my program, what will they do? They will waste time and money and bang their head against the wall trying to figure it out themselves. So I think that's so true. And one thing to point out about the freebie, one tip that I share with my community is what you put in that freebie is really important. And oftentimes food bloggers want to just put in their best recipes. And I really advise against that. I think it's fine to maybe put one recipe in there, but what you're trying to do with the freebie is bridge the gap from where your ideal student is now and where they need to be to take your class. So what are their objections? What are they thinking when they see your class and they're like, that's not going to work for me because I don't have the culinary skills, or I am gluten-free and this is a pasta class, right? Like, what are the things that they are telling themselves to talk them out of why your class won't work for them? And how can your freebie overcome those objections rather than giving them a ton of free content, which overwhelms them. And they'll be like, oh, great. I don't need her class. I have all this stuff in front of me.
So let's go back to me, sushi maker, and you're coaching me on a freebie to make. So I can say, hey, here's my vegetarian sushi that's like awesome. You can make it with like the vegetables in your fridge. And that's maybe my instinct, but what would you say to me? How do I address the gluten-free people, or the people who go, this is too expensive, or the people who say like, I don't have good knives, or whatever it is? What would you say to me?
So I would say you've got to, once again, so you're teaching sushi, but what's your approach, right? So within sushi, let's say that you are like you are making sushi accessible for, let's see, like vegan sushi. Let's do vegan sushi because that's a fun one, right? So people who love sushi, but they're vegan. So for your freebie, one of the things that I would do is, rather than have, say, a step-by-step guide to making vegan sushi, right? That's like the how, that's what you will teach them in your class. What you could instead put in your freebie are, like pantry items, like things to stock in your pantry to make the best vegan sushi, right? Or 5 utensils that you need to get your sushi game started, right? So the rolling mat and things like that. It isn't so much about the how to do it, but it's how to set them up for success so that, once they go through that guide, they are amped up and ready for your class. Now, it also is good because it weeds out the people who don't care. So if someone sees that guide and they're like, meh, that's not for me, then your class isn't for them. And that's great. That's a good thing to rule them out early.
I like that. And I like I like this idea. Like, this is what I share, is this idea of, you want to be their best friend. They're like, you're hooking them up. You know how you have the friend who like I had the friend who hooked me up on the baby stuff. Like, she literally took me to the Babies R Us and went around the store with me and was like, you need this, you don't need this, you need that. Like, she's that girlfriend. And I always think about her, that when you're that person, you're not just the teacher, you're the person hooking somebody up. You have the friend who knows like the new hip restaurant in town and has already been there and tells you what to order. Like, oh, when you go, you got to get the hummus, right. And you're like, oh, I'll get the hummus. Like, you want to be that person who says, you're not, here are the knives you need. And you don't need this knife. Like, you just need this knife and this knife. Don't worry about this knife.
Absolutely. There's a student of mine who does a great job with this. She focuses on Southeast Asian cuisine. And one of the things that she created for her freebie is basically demystifying the sauces you see at the Asian food market. So you don't, most of the labels aren't in English. So she has a picture of the bottle and tells you, like, go find this. This is really good for XYZ dish. And she doesn't teach you what to do with it, but she, like you said, is that, best friend that hooks you up with exactly what you need when you are in that market and you are lost and confused and you don't know what to do.
Like, I trust that person. I'm like, oh, you're like, okay. Yes. So we're now up, that was 3, right? Sell.
Yeah, that was sell. And the final one, T, is for teach.
Okay, let's talk about that. Do you recommend, like, logistically, we're going to do it on Zoom and we're going to do it at this time. It's going to be recorded. You can watch it later, or we're going to have 5 classes. I'm going to sell them as a bundle. Like, what do you think is the best strategy?
Yeah, that is a very hard question to answer, because it really does depend on the earlier steps. So for some audiences, a 6-class series is perfect for the instructor, right? So like if you were teaching someone how to, decorate a cake, well, maybe week 1, you're learning about the types of icing to use. Week 2, you're learning about tips, right? They build on each other. Or if you are trying to get your students to get into habits, then yes, a 6-week series, for example, makes sense because every week you're kind of checking in with them and they're building on the previous week. So that is more part of kind of defining your offer and figuring out what you are teaching in that kind of first step of zero in. But you brought up a really good point around technology. And then that's really what this teach step is about. It's figuring out what platforms to use. And aside from the tech, how do you engage students online? Because that is so different than teaching in person. And if some of your listeners have never taught before, then just the idea of getting in front of a camera and teaching to a screen can be terrifying. And so a lot of what I talk about in my program is tips for confidence. So teaching, though, I'll say from the tech perspective, Zoom is still pretty much the gold standard. So there are some other platforms and technologies out there, but Zoom is great because your students are now familiar with Zoom, right? You want to use a tool that isn't a huge hurdle for your students. And right now, Zoom, I mean, my mom knows how to use Zoom, so that says it all.
And then do you recommend, like, are you recording it and then people can watch it later if they miss it live?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one option. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that it's always good to give that option. Some students of mine have said, oh, well, maybe I'll just do recorded classes. And it's really interesting because what I've found and what I've heard and learned is that people love the live classes. They love attending the live classes because one thing to remember is that your experience isn't just about teaching them how to make something. It's about the connection that happens, right? So if you are watching a recorded class, frankly, you might as well just Google something on YouTube. Right? It's a different experience.
Like weirdly, so since the pandemic, I've been doing yoga online. And my studio records some classes and has some live. And weirdly, I do better yoga if it's live. Now, I turn my camera off because I show up in my sweatpants and like maybe I'm wearing a bra, maybe I'm not. But it's weird. I know psychologically, if it is live, if like, and I don't know what it is because it doesn't look any different than a recorded live class, that weirdly, if I know they're doing it right now in this moment, I show up differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same with cooking. And it's also just more fun and more engaging. So I recommend to basically all of my students, unless they want to go down the membership model and they want to do a library of classes, and that's a bit different and more advanced. If they're getting started out with, if they're starting out with live online cooking classes, I do recommend that they stick to live. They can add that recorded option if people want the replay, which is totally fine. But to move straight into recorded classes, I think a lot gets lost in that element because you're just not having that engagement. And for the instructors, it's so important for them to bring the students into the experience. So it's not this broadcast, it truly is participatory.
Can we talk about memberships briefly and what your thought is about whether you start off with a membership, whether you start off with a couple classes, and how do those businesses look similar and how do they look different?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that memberships can sound very appealing and very sexy and everyone loves the idea of recurring revenue, right?
Yep.
But generally, I think people underestimate the audience you need to make the math work, right? So a membership I recommend to my students that they consider a membership once they've taught a good number of a la carte classes or these one-off classes. Maybe they've done a series. They feel really comfortable with their niche. They know who they serve, what problems they solve, like the things we talked about with the freebie, right? They have that dialed in. When they get to a place where that is running and they feel comfortable with that, then they can move into a membership. Memberships are hard though, because if you think about conversion rates, right? You could have 1,000 people on your email list and you could announce your membership and it could be exactly what they want. But with memberships, it just frankly doesn't convert that high, right? You may be lucky to get 5% of your audience subscribe, right? Even if it's focused on their niche. I think that the numbers there are really important to consider. And so
would you say that's because the commitment to somebody joining a membership and then having to show up, and then it's not just a one-off thing that's like exciting. It's like, oh my God, I got to show up every month and make sushi. But what if I don't want to in July? Versus I really want to take that sushi class once, learn some sushi, have a good experience. Like, what is your thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely it. I mean, I think commitments in general are just tough for us as humans. We especially now that we're coming out of the pandemic, we're like, well, wait, I'm going to travel this summer and then the kids are going to be in school. So commitments are hard. I mean, Netflix has figured it out, of course, a great subscription model, but for the most part, subscriptions are challenging to really gain traction. But once you have those people in, and you can find a way to kind of keep them excited month after month, right? You have to keep creating new content. It can't feel stale, right? Or else they'll start to cancel. I have seen people do really, really well with it. Now, I do think it does depend also on what you're teaching. So for example, meal prep does really well in the membership format because, once again, going kind of back to the series example, it's this habit forming thing. And if you're meal prepping in July, then you probably want to do that in August and September and so on. It's a lifestyle change, right? So I think those types of, that type of content does really well in a membership format because people kind of want to hang out with you every month to improve their lives and to make things easier for them.
I think that is also, that's great. I think that is great advice. So for people who are thinking, and then I'm just going to roll it into a membership and then thousands of dollars are going to show up every month. Yeah. I like that you are more kind of realistic about it. Like, get teaching under your belt, like develop those relationships. And I like what you just said. If you're going to do a membership, it's really because people want to hang out with you. It's not necessarily, they want to make sushi every month, as much as, and then they want to come together with a group of people, with you as a leader, and kind of have this group experience, and you're making sushi.
Right. Exactly. They want, hanging out together, I should say. It's less, you as the instructor, you're facilitating that, but I mean, they'll start to build relationships and bonds, and then they can't wait to see each other the next month. And that's absolutely it. And so I don't want to necessarily be doom and gloom on memberships. I just know that, I mean, from my experience, have launched a membership and closed it because I realized for me to do a membership well, it needs to be something that I am like putting out fresh content regularly and really stepping things up. And if you treat it as this passive business, right? A lot of people talk about passive income. A membership model should not be passive income because you truly do have to put in the effort to make it last.
Absolutely. Okay. Cynthia, this is terrific. If people now want to connect with you, learn more about what you offer, like I'm sure lots of people in the audience are going like, oh my God, this is cool. Like I'm ready to go do this. How can they reach out to you, learn more about you?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that. So I do offer a free masterclass where people can sign up to learn more about the framework that I shared. I also talk about common mistakes I see a lot of people make when they enter the online cooking class space. And so they can sign up by going to hiddenrhythm.com/masterclass. And then they can also find me on Instagram. I post quite a bit of content on there. It's also just Hidden Rhythm, and it's spelled how it should be. So no funky spellings there.
Well, I just have to say, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jillian. I'm so excited that we were able to talk about this.
Okay, so what do you think? Do you think you have something to teach online that you could monetize? Kind of interesting. I really liked Cynthia's framework. It's about putting one piece in front of the other, and boom, you've got yourself a business. So remember, this is my segue. If you want to start a membership the easiest way possible, I want to talk to you. Head to MiloTree.com/ beta tester. Honestly, I can't wait to see the memberships and subscriptions that you build. And I will see you here again next week.